The morning light filtered through the cream curtains of the Parker residence, casting soft shadows across the hardwood floors. Margaret Parker sat at the kitchen table, her fingers wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. She stared at the steam that was no longer there, lost in thoughts that had kept her awake most of the night. Across the table, her husband of 15 years, Derek Parker, sat with his phone in one hand and a piece of toast in the other. He hadn't looked up at her once since sitting down 20 minutes ago. This had become their routine, two people sharing a space but living in completely different worlds. Margaret was a woman of quiet strength. At 42, she carried herself with a dignity that came from years of holding things together, even when they were falling apart. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she wore a simple, peach-colored blouse that matched the gentle nature everyone knew her for. But beneath that gentle exterior, something had been changing. Something had been growing stronger. Derek, on the other hand, had changed in a different way. Success had found him 5 years ago when his tech startup finally took off. The man who once held her hand during walks in the park had transformed into someone who measured his worth by the numbers in his bank account. His navy suit was expensive, his watch even more so, and the way he carried himself now spoke of a man who believed the world owed him something. "I need your house key," Derek said suddenly, not looking up from his phone. Margaret blinked, pulled from her thoughts. "What?" "Your house key." "I need it." His voice was flat, matter-of-fact, as if he were asking her to pass the salt. "Why would you need my house key?" Margaret asked carefully. There was something in his tone that made her uneasy, something that made the air in the kitchen feel heavier. Derek finally looked up, and there was a coldness in his eyes that Margaret had seen growing stronger over the past few months. "Because I'm changing the locks. I've made some decisions about our living arrangements, and I'll need you to find somewhere else to stay for a while." The words hung in the air between them like a thundercloud ready to burst. Margaret's hands began to tremble slightly, but she kept her voice steady. "This is my house too, Derek. We bought this together." Derek let out a short, bitter laugh. "Actually, if you look at the paperwork, you'll see that my name is the primary one on the deed. My money made the down payment. My income pays the mortgage. I gave up my career to support yours." Margaret said quietly, "I gave up my promotion at the hospital to move across the country for your business opportunity. That was our agreement. We were partners." "That was then," Derek said, standing up and straightening his tie. "Things change. I've changed. And quite frankly, Margaret, I've outgrown this marriage. There are younger, more exciting women who actually appreciate what I've become." The casual cruelty of his words struck Margaret like a physical blow. She thought of Sarah Mitchell, Derek's new assistant, who had been appearing in more and more of his social media photos, the woman with the arrow, practically pointing to her in the background of their lives, always hovering, always present. "So that's it?" Margaret asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 15 years and you're just going to throw me out?" "Don't be dramatic," Derek said, checking his reflection in the mirror by the door. "I'll give you some money to get started. Consider it a generous gesture. Now the key, please." Margaret slowly stood up. Her legs felt weak, but she walked to the counter where her purse sat. Derek watched her with an expression of impatient satisfaction, clearly expecting immediate compliance. He had always expected compliance from her. But Margaret didn't reach for her keys. Instead, she pulled out her phone and a small folder of documents she had been keeping there. "What are you doing?" Derek asked, irritation creeping into his voice. "I'm thinking about last Tuesday," Margaret said calmly, though her heart was racing. "When you were so focused on your phone at dinner, do you remember what you were doing?" Derek's eyes narrowed. "What does that have to do with anything?" "You were texting Sarah, telling her about the surprise trip to Paris you were planning. You showed me your phone by accident, remember? You laughed it off, said it was a business trip." "It is a business trip," Derek said defensively. "Using $10 million from our joint investment account?" Margaret asked, her voice still quiet but now carrying an edge of steel. "The account we both agreed would be for our future? For our retirement?" Derek's face changed. The color drained slightly and his jaw tightened. "You've been looking at our accounts?" "Our accounts," Margaret emphasized. "I have every right to look at our accounts. Just like I had every right to speak with my lawyer when I noticed you'd been moving large sums of money around 3 weeks ago." "What lawyer?" Derek's voice had gone hard now, threatening. "The same lawyer who helped me file for divorce 2 weeks ago," Margaret said. "The same lawyer who helped me freeze our joint assets until the court could divide them properly." The same lawyer who documented every message you sent to Sarah, every dinner at expensive restaurants charged to our joint credit card, every piece of evidence of your affair. Derek's face went from pale to red in an instant. He took a step toward her, his hand raising. You had no right. The slap came fast and sharp, his palm connecting with Margaret's cheek before she could move away. The sound echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. Margaret stumbled backward, her hand flying to her face, tears springing to her eyes from the shock and pain. For a moment, everything was still. Derek stood there, his hand still, raised, breathing heavily. Margaret touched her burning cheek, and something inside her that had been bending for years finally snapped straight. That, she said, her voice shaking but clear, was your biggest mistake. Derek lowered his hand, and for the first time, Margaret saw something like fear flicker across his face. Margaret, I didn't mean— Don't, she said, holding up her hand. Don't you dare apologize now. She pulled up her phone and showed him the screen. You see this? My lawyer is on speed dial. I've just sent her a text with the single word we agreed upon if things ever got physical. She's calling the police right now. She's also sending all our documentation to the judge handling our case. You're blowing this out of proportion, Derek said, but his voice had lost its certainty. No, Margaret said firmly. I'm finally seeing things in proportion. Did you think I didn't notice the money disappearing? Did you think I didn't see you grooming me for discard like I was nothing? I may have been quiet, Derek, but I was never stupid. She walked to her purse and pulled out a different set of keys. These are the keys to my car. The car I bought last month with money from my sister. I'm leaving now, but not because you're kicking me out. I'm leaving because I choose to. What about the house? Derek demanded, some of his arrogance returning. What about the $10 million? Margaret countered. The money you can't access right now? The money you were going to use to run off with Sarah? The judge has frozen everything until we go to court. And now, with what you just did, with witnesses, she gestured to the security camera in the corner of the kitchen that Derek had insisted on installing for safety, you'll be lucky to get half of what you thought you were entitled to. Derek's eyes went wide as he followed her gesture to the camera that had recorded everything. You planned this, he breathed. No, Margaret said sadly. I hoped I wouldn't need to plan anything. I hoped the man I married was still in there somewhere. But you killed him, Derek. You killed him with your greed and your arrogance and your cruelty. I just made sure I'd survive when you did. She picked up her purse and the folder of documents. Her cheek still stung, but her head was held high. My lawyer will be in touch, she said. And Derek? That key you wanted, you're welcome to change the locks. Because by the time this is over, this house won't be yours to lock anyone out of. Margaret walked to the door, her steps steady despite the trembling in her hands. She could feel Derek's eyes on her back, could sense his world crumbling as he realized what his actions had cost him. As she reached for the door handle, Derek spoke one last time. You'll regret this. Margaret paused and turned back to look at him, really look at him. She saw a man who had everything, and threw it away, because he thought he deserved more. She saw a man who had become small in his pursuit of feeling big. No, she said softly. The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. She opened the door and stepped out into the morning sunshine. Behind her, she heard Derek shouting. Heard something crash, probably his phone hitting the wall. But she didn't turn back. She just kept walking to her car, each step feeling lighter than the last. 6 months later, Margaret stood in the small but cozy apartment she'd rented downtown. The divorce had been finalized. The judge, after seeing the security footage and reviewing the evidence of Derek's affair and financial manipulation, had ruled strongly in her favor. She had her share of their assets, enough to start over, enough to rebuild. Derek had lost more than money. He'd lost his reputation when the footage leaked to his business partners. Sarah had left him when she realized the Paris trip was canceled permanently. His company was struggling under the weight of bad publicity. But Margaret wasn't thinking about Derek anymore. She was thinking about the job offer she'd received from the hospital, a management position that valued her years of experience. She was thinking about the art class she'd signed up for, something she'd always wanted to try. She was thinking about the future, and for the first time in years, that future felt like her own. She looked at her new set of keys lying on the counter, keys to a life she had built through strength she didn't know she had, and she smiled. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. And sometimes when someone tries to take everything from you, the best revenge is simply refusing to let them. Margaret had learned that she was enough, all by herself, and that was worth more than any house, any marriage, any amount of money. That was worth everything.